Welcome to Count It Off with your host, Jeff Dayton, where we explore the world of music through the eyes of some fascinating guests. So get tuned up and let's count it off.
I am so excited that you guys are here with me today because this is a very special interview for me. This is Kevin Odegard, and Kevin was a sideman for Bob Dylan. He's got a great story to tell about the famous Blood on the Tracks album, and especially the song Tangled Up In Blue. So hello, Kevin.
Hi, Jeff. How are you, old friend?
I am great. So glad to have you on Count It Off, and man, it's been a long time. We've talked about doing this. Grateful that you said yes. Kevin Odegard, for those of you who don't know him, he has been part of a lot of things that you do know, and he's written books, he's led national organizations, he's been a recording artist, and I think the number one feather in anyone's cap is when you work with a legend, and that is none other than Bob Dylan. So tell us about where you grew up real quick and how you got into playing guitar.
Well, Jeff, we have much in common. We grew up in the same part of the country, and I grew up in Princeton, Minnesota, and you were in the more urban environs of Minneapolis. Really, I grew up in kind of a summer camp environment where I learned my first instrument was ukulele. I learned at Camp Adjua. And I met a kid there in '65, a little pudgy kid in the tent next to me. His name was Bobby Rivkin. Oh. And beginning, like us, the beginning of a lifelong friendship. And Bobby and I did the infamous 20-mile hike together without taking the poison ivy cutoff. You and I have lots in common, including having worked with legends and having worked together in bands. So you piqued my curiosity on the opening here. When you do interviews yourself, which you do from time to time, what do you consider when you have your choice of what to talk about? Now, you were very closely associated with Glenn Campbell in your career. Mm-hmm. Here's the question, because everybody asks me this question. Did you ever get lost in Glenn Campbell land?
Well, we spent a lot of time together. Golf course, airplane, green room, catering, the whole thing, backstage, at his house, just doing lots of fun stuff and even some tropical stuff and working out in the gym. And he was, I guess you're immersed in that. I mean, you're almost living that life for 200 days a year.
And you're still trying to run your own career. You have your own songwriting habit going on. And
habit's a good word. Yep.
Where do you split the difference?
Wait a minute. Whose interview is this? Involved? I'm interviewing you. Yeah, here you are giving me a nice prop up. I appreciate that. I just try to keep all the pucks on the ice going in the same direction, if you know what I mean.
I asked you for a very good reason, because I never know how to answer that question.
Yeah,
I've lived in the shadow of Bob Dylan, whom I spent 6 minutes with in 1974 around Christmas. And you've lived in the long, cool, wonderful glow of Glenn Campbell, I think you were there a couple of decades, something like that.
Yeah, a long time, 15 years actually.
But similarly, those two legends have followed both of us through life. So we have more than being in a band together. Mm-hmm. We have a deep affection for country rock music, and we made some ourselves as kids. It's so as I do interviews, I like to know what my colleagues do when they do interviews, because with me, everybody wants to talk about Bob Dylan. When you're offered a gig, let's say, for instance, I've never said no to a Bob Dylan tribute. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, rightly so.
So have you ever said no to a Glenn Campbell tribute?
Only one time, and it wasn't something I could do just schedule wise. It involved a lot of travel and a lot of time, and I just wasn't able to work it in.
I love to hear others' viewpoints on this stuff, because it can be easy to lose yourself in someone else's legend. It really can, and
interesting.
Both of us are studies in that.
You mentioned Bobby Rivkin, and Yeah, he's forever going to be asked about working with Prince. You and I, though, didn't meet each other until early 1976. And here's a little something that you sent me that I enjoyed a lot. Minnesota musicians filled out the roster for 1975's Silver Lining on ASI Records. That was your record, Kevin. Producer David Z. Rifkin played everything in sight: electric sitar, high-strung guitar, 6 and 12-string electric and acoustic guitars. Bobby watched intently, played percussion, and soon came up with a great part and won the drum spot on Roseport 505. This was Bobby Z's very first professional recording session. Can you believe it? A few weeks after this, you, Jeff, won the lead guitar spot in the KO band with Cinnamon Girl. I had been down to Williams Pub in Minneapolis. I lived in the Wedge down there in South Minneapolis, and I enjoyed going down there and listening to people. And Billy Hallquist, our dear late great friend, was playing down there, and he was just this happy hippie with a ponytail, and he was playing songs by Texas guys with 3 names, and we chatted for a while, and then he said, hey, there's an audition for a band for a lead spot. And I had already taken a gig with Jim Van Buskirk in his band called Double Nickel, but I went to the audition anyway, and we had a great time. I just loved playing with you that day.
You played Cinnamon Girl.
Oh, I remember that one. That was the capper. Yeah. And we went long on that one, didn't we?
Everybody's socks off.
Well,
we did.
I appreciate that. It was such a good mix of energy and creativity, just whatever. It wasn't like a rehearsed thing. It was raw and real.
On the heels of the accidental success of my career, which caused me to have to take a break from my railroad career.
Well, let's go there. Working as a brakeman on the train. What was that like? And when did that start?
Well, that started in 1974. I met a kid named Joe Stanger. You may have met at a Super Bowl party in early 1974. And you have to be related to somebody to get hired on the railroad. It's a legacy. There are no job applications. There are no auditions. You have to be family to get on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad as anything. And fortunately, we both got on thanks to his connections. And shortly after that Super Bowl 1974, I was a brakeman and he chose to come home at night. So he was a switchman in the local yards. And we built up friendships with brakemen and switchmen and engineers and conductors all over the Midwest. And they became the eventual fans of what you and I put together with the KO band. There were always a few rails, as we called them, in the audience, whooping and hollering. And we tailored our repertoire to them, wrote a bunch of railroad songs. So wrote a song about Old Wine, Iowa, leaving Dodge tonight. That's Dodge Center, where we went through. Our trains would go anywhere between South St. Paul to Old Wine, Iowa, to Omaha, Nebraska, over by Mankato, a little place called Kasota, where we broke down one night. I was on the rear of a caboose listening to Elton John, and the Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me came on. As the Viking northbound freight express, a very hot train, came roaring through. We were on the siding waiting for them to come because they had to get into Minneapolis, St. Paul to distribute to Super Value. It was a huge client. And they came roaring through, threw a cinder out of the engine, blew up the grain elevator where we were waiting. It burned to the ground.
Wow.
And melted the main line. So they had to taxi us to a little town called St. James. And I wrote songs about that and about Roseport, which is really an oil refinery, but I made it a little more romantic than that. Mm-hmm. And I got to be friends with the old guys. There were a lot of even firemen on the trains in those days because of the union. There were no fires. There was no coal. There was nothing to shovel. So Zach would keep track of the Twins game. And that was his job. And he'd come up in the engine. He'd sleep in the back of the engines in the rear units, and he'd come up to the head end about every half hour and update us on the score of the Minnesota Twins.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the extent of his duty on the southbound freight train on Chicago Northwestern. So it was a crazy place, crazy characters.
What a life. What a life. And the Twins were not red hot at that era either, as I remember. So it was probably a lot of bad news.
And they were usually playing Kansas City. And so it was kind of a snore, really. But that's what Zach had to do. And it was just kind of, but I got him talking, and he tells stories about how to turn the smoke the perfect color of gray. It kept the engines going at maximum efficiency. And it was a thrilling adventure for me, because it was old meets new. It's like old Hollywood meets new Hollywood. Well, this is old railroad steam engine people.
Yeah.
Meeting these young kids who were coming on as relatives and grandsons. Lots of stories about the old days on the railroad. Lots of mainline, what they called cornfield meets.
Yeah.
In other words, you come around a corner and here's a train coming right at you. This was before the block system. It was before anything safety-wise was implemented. And we were on the cusp of that. It wasn't a very safe place when I worked there.
Yeah.
I can tell you that, because I was not very safe myself. But David Zimmerman called me when Joe and I were watching Kojak one night, our favorite television show.
I have a little excerpt from your book. Kevin and Andy Gill wrote a book called A Simple Twist of Fate, Bob Dylan and the Making of Blood on the Tracks. And it is a historian's dream. If you guys want to get that, it's still available, and it's out there on Da Capo Press. Winter cuts hard through Minneapolis, a place so cold that the city installed the famous Skyway system of enclosed walkways to enable shoppers to cross city center streets without having to brave 10 and 20 below weather. So when the phone rang one particularly crisp and blustery night just after Christmas, 1974, in Kevin and Joe's apartment overlooking the Southeast Rail Yards, they ignored it and carried on watching a Kojak rerun. The flatmates were brakemen, and they knew that it probably was the crew dispatcher calling him into work and who wanted a ride, but on the umpteenth ring, Odegard relented and picked up the receiver, and as it happened, it wasn't the railroad calling after all. I like that. It's such a well-written book. I mean, it's masterfully written, Kevin. Tell us about that call and kind of the short story of what happened right after.
Well, I was asked to find a guitar, and David didn't play guitar. He was a music teacher. He played piano and a choir director. So I knew something was up. I also knew who his brother was. And he said, what kind of guitar? Well, he said, a 1930s vintage Martin, call it a 0042 gut string, G. Call me back. So I called my friend at the Podium music store, Chris Weber. And Chris got immediately suspicious because I was a regular down there. I was always going down there and jamming and buying picks and strings. And he was a very nice guy, like a fellow camper. But he got very suspicious on the phone call. He said, why do you need that guitar? Have you been in my store? I said, no, I'm just a friend of mine. Who called? Well, David Zimmerman. Oh, okay. So what does he want that guitar for? And who does he want it for? Because everybody in town knew who David Zimmerman's brother was. And I said, well, I'd assume it's for Bob. And I could hear Bob whispering to David over the series of phone calls that took place after that. One by one, we lined up a band, beginning with Greg Inhofer, and Chris Weber refused to loan us the guitar unless he could come along and be at the session.
That's funny.
Babysit the guitar.
That's funny.
Because and this happened. He was correct in doing that because Bob destroyed the finish and had to buy it for $1,500 at the end of it.
$1,500. Oh my gosh, it would be like in the near $100,000 these days.
Yep, very likely.
Wow.
But Bob wanted it for a song called Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts. We didn't find the gut string version. We got him a steel string version. it was called the Joan Baez model because it had a small body. It was terrific for microphones. It didn't make microphones boom. Great recording guitar. And we found it. I picked up Chris the next night. Within 24 hours, we were in my Ford Pinto, kind of an ugly green color, heading for Sound 80. Chris and I piled out of the car, walked into the studio. I did bring my guitar that night, but didn't play it. And the first thing we saw when we walked through the door was a guy who looked just like Bob Dylan. I mean, this guy was a dead ringer for Bob Dylan. He was sitting in a chair about 20 feet through the door. And as you got closer and closer, you realized that this is Bob Dylan. And so
shiver me timbers. Wow.
We both got the world famous cold, wet fish handshake because Bob never wanted to shake anybody's hand as long as he lived. And if he had to, you got the cold, dead, wet fish.
Oh, my.
And then he slipped away. Everybody talks about it. I mean, he did it. I wasn't special. He did it to David Letterman and everybody else he met too. Everybody has a story about Bob's handshake. So we met him, and everybody else was flabbergasted. The other people we lined up, Billy Peterson and Bill Berg, were the finest jazz rhythm section in town. They'd been playing on Leo Kottke's latest album, which was Dreams and all that stuff. Now, Leo never played anything the same way twice. So these guys were quick on the uptake, and they were ready for this session. It was a perfect lineup. Chris played guitar the first night. Bob chose him, just out of their conversation, to teach the songs to the band. So they'd stay in the vocal booth on the 27th of December, 1974, but it was freezing cold outside, below zero. And one by one, Chris Webber learned the songs, beginning with Idiot Wind, which started on a very dissonant sounding mistake called C minor 7th diminished. And it was really an awful thing to hear. So Chris did some fixes with it and pulled it around so that it worked a little bit better. Someone's got it in for me. It starts off with a bang, but it took 7 takes and maybe 8 to get it. And then the band really nailed it. I sat in wonder and watched them. I was allowed for some reason to stay in the room. Leo Kottke was in the booth because he was just hanging around doing something else. He was chatting up Bob and didn't realize it until 20 years later. And now when you see Leo Kottke in concert, he tells about the conversation he had with the guy who he didn't know was Bob Dylan. And he always gets a laugh.
It's almost better that way, isn't it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend here in Nashville that when he moved here, he got a job in a sports place, and he was helping this pretty blonde lady all the time put the canoe carrier on her SUV and helping with her bike rack. And she'd always ask for him. And he was a handsome dude too, you know, and finally he said, you know, I'm from Florida. I have no idea about anything about country music, but something tells me that you're in country music. Are you somebody famous? She goes, yeah, I'm Faith Hill. He goes, well, I'm sorry. She goes, I'm not, because I actually love it that you didn't know that, and you've been so sweet to me. So that's great.
Bob was happy with that first night. We finished up with You're a Big Girl Now. You're a Big Girl Now. Just 2 songs. And then Billy Peterson had to go to work at the Longhorn because Bob Rockwell, his band leader, the sax player, said, I don't care who you're playing with. You're going to show up for downbeat at 9 o'clock sharp, or you're out of the band.
Oh.
Are you a professional or not?
Wow.
And, you know, Bob Schmob, be here on time. So he had to leave, and Bob totally understood. He said, yeah, sure, go take care of your gig. And Bob struck up a very close relationship with Bill Berg, who was his underclassman by about 5 years at Hibbing High School.
Wow.
Had been. And Berg was a genius in those sessions, in every session I ever knew him to play. He played at the very tail end of the beat. And you can hear it on Idiot Wind, you can hear it on Tangled Up in Blue. So we all went home back to our lives, and I hadn't played, but what a thrill to get to see Bob Dylan live in the studio 5 feet away from you.
Yeah.
You know, I was happy. And then the next day, the phone rang, and it's David. And he says, well, Bob was really happy with what happened. So can you guys all come back Monday, the 30th? I said, we all said yes immediately.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be paid scale and show up at 5:00, same as before. And bring your guitar. Because unbeknownst to me, my keyboard playing friend, Greg Inhofer, had called David and said, look, Kevin got us all this gig. He brought us all into this circle. Why don't you give him a chance to play? It was a very kind thing to do. Now,
No
I didn't know
kidding.
about that for 20 or 30 years.
Wow.
A third party told me, because Greg never, he never pats himself on the back, never toots his own horn. He just plays like the Dickens.
Hey, Kevin, let's take 2 seconds here. I don't want to stop your story, but I do want folks to hear a little bit of your music. And this is one that I think I played on, but it is such a fun song to listen to. This is one of Kevin Odegard, Everything is Cool.
There I was, 24 and still alive, wondering how I managed to survive. Staring in the face of 1975. But everything is cool, everything's alright. I never thought I'd be a railroad man, working on a rundown old caboose, and then they give me a call and I go to work again. But everything is cool, everything's alright. Yeah, everything is cool, everything's alright.
And I just love that Kevin has got such a dry sense of humor to it. That's great. And the cool thing is it talks about your work as a brakeman. So that's a good song to play first.
Well, you're a brakeman, and nothing is ever cool because you're always away from home. You can't plant roots down anywhere.
Right.
And every meal is breakfast. It's either morning or it's the start of a route. It could be at 4:00 in the afternoon, but you're fresh out of your 8 hours of sleep. So what's the first meal you eat in the morning? It's breakfast. So I ate eggs for 4 years, eggs and bacon.
Man, I could eat breakfast 3 meals a day. So you're back at the studio at Sound 80 on Monday, the 30th of December, 1974. Let's pick it up there.
5:00 sharp. Everybody pulls out their instruments. Paul Martinson, the genius engineer, has all the mics tuned up, and he's got me at U87. And then he's got another mic up the neck of my Martin D28, which I'd gotten from Manny's Music in 1969, coming off a gig at North Dakota at the Teddy Roosevelt Park, Medora. So I'm in tune. Everybody's tuned up. Chris is in the box with Bob, and he comes out with a song, and it's called "Tangled Up in Blue," and it's in G. And they play it for the band, and we learn it. And it's not as difficult as, let's say, for instance, Idiot Wind was. And I picked it up, and I came up with a lick that I basically had lifted from the night before when I was listening to one of my favorite records called Joy of Cooking. It was a duo, Tony Brown and Terry Garthwaite, out of the Bay Area. Joy of Cooking, Midnight Blues. Midnight is a lonely time. And had a lick on it. Da-da-dum-dum, da-da-dum-dum. And so I added that lick to the front end before we did a first take of Tangled Up in Blue in G. And we took it. It was 1, 2, 3, go. And early one morning, the sun was shining. And then 6 minutes roll by, and Bob launches into a harmonica solo, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good, and I didn't really make a whole lot of mistakes. Actually,
That's the goal, isn't it?
I sent you an ISO copy of the next take. With you have a rare item, which is just me and Bob in the mix, and so you can hear any mistakes or tuning errors that I made. There were few, and so I can say, and I do, never before or since those 6 minutes in the studio in Sound 80 on December 30th, 1974, have I played that well.
Wow.
I played almost as well as Jeff Dayton on that day, and I was proud of it. I heard it finally in 2003 when Steve Berkowitz mixed it for a Super Audio CD 4-channel. I went out and bought a Super Audio CD player, and I isolated the left ear channel. And there's my guitar, and I'm doing the diddle-dum-dum, diddle-dum-dum. And I remember going up to Bob in the booth at the end of the take, because we were all just shivering with excitement at the end of that, looking at our shoes. Nobody said a word for about 30, 40 seconds. It was certainly one of the greatest moments of music that I've ever been involved with. But it was really the only one. Nothing ever came close. Before that or since that. I've tried and I've kept playing, but because of the level of musician that I got to play with on that night, and because of Bob's brilliance, and because of the eye contact Bob kept up with me and the others in the room, we were really in touch with where the song needed to go. And he told the story, and I went up to him afterwards and said, "Hey, Bob, you might want to bump my guitar up a little bit when you mix this thing." And I came up with a really good figure that I think really identifies the song. It's kind of like what you used to call an ID lick. So that's what it was for me. And I told Bob about it, and he basically just shook his head and without saying anything, kind of just acknowledged that I'd said something. And we all went on with our lives. We did 2 more songs that night. We did Lily, Rosemary, and the Jack of Hearts, which was a 3-piece, Bob and Billy and Bill. And then I think Chris played on that one as well. But Bob played the Joan Baez guitar on that one. It's like a movie. David Zimmerman came out and said, "Hey, it's a long song. When you think it's over, it's not. Keep playing." So they did. I heard the clickety-clack of the rails going with Bill Berg's drum part. Because everything that I ever heard on the railroad was clickety-clack.
Yeah.
All the way, 24/7, it was clickety-clack world for me.
Wow.
So then we wound up bringing Peter Ostrusko, who was very sick. He wasn't actually conscious that he was doing this, but we picked him up at the 400 bar. We had him picked up, brought over to play mandolin, and he did on "If You See Her, Say Hello," which was the final thing that we did that night.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob said, "Can I borrow your mandolin?" And Bob put on a higher on the neck version, higher register. Yeah. So they had 2 mandolins, and there was in the mix. They were spread left and right.
Oh, that's Bob at the
and even it was wonderful, and it was and Ostrusko, Peter, the great, woke up the next morning and called his friend Tom Tordoff and said, "Man, I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamt I was in a studio with Bob Dylan." And Tordoff was a banjo player.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny.
Remarked back to him, "Peter, that was no dream. You were there."
Oh, that's great.
Everybody in town knows. Yeah.
Well, who is this guy we're talking to? It's Kevin Odegard, and he has really parlayed that into an enormous and important career in music. And we're going to hear a little bit more of his music. This is an old one from the Silver Lining album, the one you did right after your Dylan sessions. This is called Old Wine.
Good evening, and welcome to this, another in a series of live recorded concerts from Sound 80 Studios. Would you please welcome with me Kevin Odegard and the KO Band.
Leaving Dodge behind, heading for old wine. Snow is all around, Christmas Eve in this town. Stores are closing down, and there's not an open cafe to be found. I'm stuck out on the road, paying dues, I'm told. Time is standing still, switching one more mill. Don't know where to go. There's not a friendly face that I know. We're stuck out on the main line, getting me to the big eye. Get them engines all fired, get me down to one on time.
That band is Kevin Odegard, Gary Lopak, Bobby Z. Rifkin, Billy Hallquist, Jeff Drayton, yours truly, and Bruce McCabe, who was good enough to do that with us that day. And that is so cool to hear those moments in history, Kevin. You really, I mean, from the fame of playing with Dylan, you got right in there and did the record that you did, the Silver Lining record with David Z., Bobby's older brother, as your producer, which I am told was his first record as a producer. Was that right?
Yeah, he didn't know what he was doing. That's a producer.
It didn't sound like it. It sounded like he did a great job.
He played everything, and he had a great time. He was coming off a songwriting gig with Graham Parsons.
Oh wow!
At A&M Records in Los Angeles.
Remember him saying that.
So this was his introduction. I idolized him. They came to the Spectacle Lake Ballroom near my home in '64, and I sat at his feet and listened to the double twin reverbs. He had two of them. It was a roller rink as well, and the floor actually bowed. There were so many people dancing and jumping up and down on it.
That's great.
And he sounded like the whole Byrds just by himself.
And you and I are both old Byrds fans. I mean, I think Sweetheart of the Rodeo actually featured a guitar player named Glenn Campbell, as well as Clarence White and some of my heroes. But that era, that early 60s, mid-60s Byrds sound, the jangly guitar bands, has always been a favorite sound of mine. Right after you did that record, then we put the KO band together, and I mentioned that audition with you, and we started touring, and there was a young writer from the Minneapolis Tribune. He was I think he was a new guy writing music, and his name was John Bream. And we took off for Mankato and Des Moines to play a couple of gigs, and he was doing a feature for the Star and Tribune with one brand new band and one hit band. And so we were the new band that got the pleasure of him riding with us. And then he was covering Aerosmith, this other band that was doing quite well. He wrote a great article about us, and I think we played the Rathskeller in Mankato, if I remember right.
That's right.
And then
the Rats.
Somewhere down in Iowa, all I remember about that Des Moines stop was that we walked into a studio, and I think it was called Quad, because we really wanted to connect with studios. We were excited to be touring, and we walked in there, and Bobby was kind of hustling up some work, and they said, "Can you play to a click?" He goes, "Oh yeah, do it all the time." Yeah. And we were walking back to the cars, and Bobby was just sweating bullets. I said, "What's wrong, Bobby?" He goes, "I've never done that before in my life, but I just didn't want to tell him no." It was so funny. Yeah, those good times.
Smart kid.
Yeah, well, he knew when
did you meet Gary Lopak?
I met him at the audition at ASI, and renewed my friendship or acquaintance with Billy Hallquist that day. I had never met Bruce McCabe, and he was so cool. Of course, Lamont Cranston was his main claim to fame then, but he's sure gone on to a lot more good things like Johnny Lang and various other things. But yeah, Gary and I we clicked, and we're still great pals, as you know, and you can hear his voice on there on the Old Wine song. Sounds so good. It, that high harmony, he just has that perfect harmony voice. And I think you guys were, meant to be.
He's everybody's Everly brother.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
That's who he is. He's an Everly type.
Yep.
He just can harmonize.
The next time I saw you was in Santa Monica, and we were down on the beach somewhere, and I think it was a place called Your Mother's Place, or it was a music room, and we were down there to hear.
At my place.
At my place, that was it. And we were and Gary was living in Santa Monica, and the three of us and we're all wearing skinny ties. There's a picture somewhere of us. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But from there, you really astounded me with your ability to connect with people, and you took a fledgling organization called Songwriters Resources Services, and you turned it into the National Academy of Songwriters, NAS. Tell us quickly about that. I want to hear about how that happened.
We needed a voice, and there was none because the screenwriters had a guild, the film composers had a society. Everybody had somebody representing them or a union. The musicians union, I can say this in all honesty, basically did nothing for anybody in Local 47 there, except for they had a death and dismemberment benefit. If you lost a finger loading your gear, they'd give you $200. So there was no group that spoke up when digital music became a real thing, and everybody got reinvented. All these albums that had been hits in the 60s and early 70s were reissued, and they had already appeared in movies, but none of these contracts that anybody had signed had any language about this new technology. So the record companies were making out like bandits, and somebody had to go in there and speak for the songwriters on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. That was my job. I kind of invented it because the wealthy songwriters, the successful songwriters funded me, and they wanted a representative. They wanted a spokesperson on Capitol Hill, bumping up the writer's penny. Source licensing was a thing where you should be paid more for when your song is in a movie or a television show. All kinds of new formats, games. Nobody anticipated, video games, all that stuff. So we were that voice, and we grew as an organization. The night that you came down, we had Steve Dorff as the songwriter, and he wrote Through the Years for Kenny Rogers. Huge hit. And I saw Steve a month ago. He came down to Florida and did a benefit for cystic fibrosis a few miles south of me here. And so we shook hands and had a reunion. And he got up and played all of his hits. And it was just like being back at the National Academy of Songwriters all over again. We had Randy Newman, we had everybody come in and talk about how they made magic. And we also had seminars on the business, so people could take care of their copyrights and take care of their the details of their lives.
I remember the big news was that you were somehow able to get Paul McCartney and Lionel Richie to join up too. That was big news where I lived, which was Phoenix at the time. Richie
was easy because we named a scholarship after him at UCLA. And McCartney was a sociable guy, and my association with BMI brought me into his environment several times, and I had lunch at the same table as Paul several times. I met the other Beatles. I was in the same room as John Lennon several times, but I kept my distance because he developed a rather grouchy, irascible reputation by that time. I didn't want to get on the wrong side of him.
Man, that's shortly before he was killed too.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, those are unbelievable achievements, and there you are, and you're making people appreciate songwriters and pay for songwriters. And in Nashville here, our union is run by Dave Pomeroy, who is a lifetime player, a session guy, road dog, and he took over from, I'd just say the old guard, if you will, and it turned the organization into a viable and productive representative for songwriters. And he is a fierce dog in the pits when it comes to musicians' rights, getting to be now
Is
the
that,
guys are
is that
getting,
an SAI?
no, that's not. That's the Nashville Musicians Union. And
Okay.
we're nothing to do with NSAI. We are the guys that, I mean, you think about all the A-list players that are on the records. Now they're getting paid for when their songs are used in different formats. So there's a recording agreement, and they're getting paid for sessions that they normally would not have. And so these guys, especially the Eddie Bayers and Brent Mason and everybody, I mean, they're getting a ton of dough from that. So it's money that's due them, really, by right. So I love it, and I'm
You
glad.
got to have a guy.
Yeah. And David is our champion, so he works hard, tirelessly for us. Well, let's listen to some more Kevin Odegard music right now. I think we're going to pull up a song called "Lost at Sea."
Searching for gold. Yeah, I'm running for gold. Got 100 hungry souls on board. I took all the money they could afford. Now I'm doing my best. Get back to Key West. Gonna set my course in the morning. Right before dawn, we're going across. When they lift that small craft warning, we're going across.
That is a cool track, Kevin. I love that.
That's you on guitar.
I was afraid of that. Yeah. That was, it's so cool how we've kept this friendship going all these years. And we've had some wonderful times back in Minnesota honoring Bob Dylan. You brought me in to fill in, on guitar when we were doing that with all the guys from Blood on the Tracks that were still around. Peter Lang, Peter Ostrusko, Billy Peterson. By then it was a different drummer. We had Bobby doing a lot of it, and Scott Sansby, and great times.
Here's what's special about Jeff Dayton, and I've known you most of my life now. You're different from everybody you've just named. You're different from anybody I've ever played with in that you're a composer. When you play lead guitar, I think you consider what you're doing without just jumping in and noodling. Because you always come up with a melody that goes someplace. I mean, this train goes to Mankato, the other train goes to St. Louis. You are a man with a destination in mind, and you take everything musically very, very literally, and you go someplace with it. No. You're the most talented lead guitarist I've ever played with.
Well, you're talking about David Z, and you're talking about, our dear friend Lonnie Knight. We lost him a couple of years ago, and those are great players, man. I appreciate your mentioning me in that group. Well, Kevin,
and you stuck with it.
Yeah, we've both found our path, and I think there's something to be said for that. I want to mention too here that Kevin sent me his latest record, and I listened to it, and I fell for that last song on there. It's called "When Heart Is Broken." And I wrote him, and I asked him, would you consider letting me record this on my next record? Because for two reasons. One is it's a wonderful song. And the other is I wanted to thank you for the kindness that you showed me in 1976. Because you took a kid that didn't know anything. I barely tied my tennis shoes back then. And you heard something, and you added me to your thing. And it was a huge boost to my career. It had credibility written all over it. And so if it's okay with you, Kev, I'm going to play my version of this song. the way a guitar talks. Just a bunch of strings and a wooden box, with time to play, time to laugh, and time to heal. My fingers ache, my voice is shot. This old guitar is all I've got. Is this the best that I can do for losing you? Some things are better left unsaid. Some words never spoken. We hang by such a slender thread when a heart is broken. When a heart is broken. I love that song, K.O. I really do. And I'm going to tell you that the guys that are playing on that are A-list players. That's Brent Mason on guitar. That's Lonnie Wilson on drums. Lonnie's played on over 120 number ones. And a session we were doing together, Brent was on it. And I said, well, how many number ones have you played on, Brent? And the guy across the room goes, all of them. That's the guys we got. And Scotty Sanders and Mike Rojas. And just, I tell you what, I always heard that as kind of a Don Williams vibe. And I adored Don and I, cherished his sound. And so that's kind of where I steered it. But Kevin, nowadays you live in Florida. You've got a good life going down there, and you've got a boat, and you've got a wonderful woman in your life. One other thing I want to ask you too, Kevin, is tell us about the Bob Dylan Museum in Tulsa and your contribution to that museum. That was a big event.
The Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa is run by experts and archivists, and they have entertainment, and they have the entire written belongings, all the memorabilia of Bob Dylan himself. They paid $20 million to Bob for everything that he'd ever done. So he emptied out all of his warehouses, and all of it's in Tulsa on exhibit, including my guitar, the 1969 Martin D28 Rosewood. And it's an amazing place, because if you walk in, the first room that you walk in is a recreation of Main Street in Hibbing, Minnesota, which is very much like Main Street in my hometown, Princeton.
Wow.
And it just takes you on a journey. Everything downstairs is Bob Dylan, and then they have a rotating exhibit upstairs of photographers and authors and musicians, Jesse Ed Davis, everybody who's ever been associated with Bob gets their day in the sun in Tulsa. It's a wonderful, wonderful place.
I love that.
It's centrally located, but Tulsa is not the entertainment capital of the world. But if you're on your way, if you're even close in Tulsa, go there. Yeah.
Back when I was first coming to Nashville, I was playing songs for a guy named Charlie Bragg from Iffen Music there on the CBS building there on 16th Avenue. And Charlie was a sweet guy, and we always sit and visit, and his secretary Peggy was there. But Charlie was an engineer at Columbia back in the 60s, and he worked on the record for the Statler Brothers that was an accidental record when Cash didn't show up, which was Flowers on the Wall. He also engineered Dylan's Nashville Skyline and Blonde on Blonde. And Charlie would pick up the studio right afterwards. He'd be, picking up the trash and the food and whatever was laying around. And Dylan's lyrics were on the music stand. And he asked him, "Do you want these?" And Dylan says, "Nah, I can do whatever. You can get rid of them if you want to." Well, Charlie was smart and he kept them. And I would always ask him about that. And well, he passed away sadly. And I got a hold of his family some years ago, and I said, "Did anything ever happen?" They said, "Yeah, we've still got them. We haven't decided what we're going to do with them." But can you imagine the handwritten lyrics to Lady or Highway 61 or any of that stuff? That would be great.
And you've got a wonderful museum in Nashville called the Musicians Hall of Fame. They take a lot of that kind of stuff in. And so that can be shared for the next generation. We're not going to live forever.
Nope.
And nor is our work. So I always suggest, and some people take my advice and other people don't, but I always suggest that you share it with the next generation and the generation after that, because this music, a lot of it is really, really timeless. And the lyrics, I mean, Bob Dylan Center has everything that Bob had, but there are so many other things floating around out there that could be shared without actually, giving up, your ownership.
Well,
you can share it with the public.
That's great. Well, Kevin, we've run into the end of our hour together here, and I truly appreciate your stories. We haven't even gotten into the Prince story, but I guess that was more Gary and Bobby and me that this
Have
young
Bobby on.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna try to get Owen and Bobby and David Z and Matt Fink and try to get Tommy Barbarella in on the mix to tell some stories on the Purple one. But we were at Moon Sound at South Minneapolis, and we were rehearsing the band and doing some stuff. And this kid would come in and borrow my guitar and play it on these tracks, really cool, funky things, and he did unusual things with the miking, and he seemed to be really in charge of everything he did. He could sing it all, played drums, played the funky church piano that was in there, that old, ragged shag carpeting and egg carton ceilings. And after we went our separate ways and Gary and I went out to the bungalow for a country gig, Bobby said, well, I'm going to hang around with this Prince kid. I really like what he's doing. We're jamming at Owen's place. I'm going to see where that goes. So that was a story that I want to be told also, how we all gave Prince his start. But Kevin, I appreciate you so much, and thank you again for your kindness. And all you got to do now to send it home is tell us where we can find your music. Where are you streaming? Do you have a social media site?
Everywhere. I'm streaming on every store that exists.
Great.
Through TuneCore. I'm on iTunes. I'm on Apple Music.
Yeah.
Amazon. Any format that you have.
Well, for today, thank you so much, Kevin Odegard, and all of us thank you. And all you got to do now is say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Hey, baby.
Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this show. We invite you to check out all the other episodes and share this channel with all of your friends. Until next time, peace.